Good morning everyone. My name is Dr. Ujjwal Mrinal. I am a MDS and today I will be discussing topic on body fluids and circulation. So let's first understand these two terms. What is body fluids and what is circulation? Body fluids refer to the fluids such as blood and lymph that flow in our body, and how they what is their structure, how they function, we will learn about those topics. And what is circulation? But circulation means how if something that flows in a circuit, how something starts from one point and it ends at another point, how it need not be a straight line. So it flows from one thing and then it ends at another thing, like blood flows from a heart and then it receives and then it again reaches the heart, so forms a circuit. And how this circulation is of this blood is done, that we will study in this chapter. So the chapter is mainly about the circulatory system in humans. So today we will be discussing mainly on the human physiology part, and we also know that in lower organisms the circulation happens mainly through the body cavities, also with the help of water. But today we will be discussing about the human physiology. So let's first understand this basic concept that all living cells, they require nutrients and oxygen, and for the purpose of surviving, for the formation of energy in form of ATP, these things are required, and then they release metabolic waste products such as carbon dioxide and ammonia and urea. And so for the transportation of these substances we require some efficient mechanism, and that mechanism is circulatory system. So today we will be studying about the human circulatory system, and before that we let's discuss about these two types of circulatory system, that is one is open, one is closed. In organisms such as arthropoda and mollusk, we see that they have an open circulatory system. In this, the blood flows from the heart and they open into a cavity which is called as sinus, and in these the body cells, they bathe in blood, they are actually in direct contact with the blood, and then the metabolic waste product, then they enter through the veins and enter, the flow is then circuit is then maintained. So the cells are in direct contact in this, but in closed the cells do not come in direct contact with the blood. The blood, they always flow in tube like structures, tube and tubules, and they flow in the heart and then in the artery, arterioles, capillaries, and then to the venues, then vein, and then they reach the heart. So this is a closed circuit, so it is called as closed circulatory system. It is seen in annelids and in chordata. Starting with the circulatory system, it consists of three parts. One is blood, one is blood vessels, and then heart. So we will all see all these three things in detail. First we will study about blood. What is blood? Blood is a special connective tissue that is found in our body, and it composed of two parts, mainly plasma, and one is cellular part, that is called form elements. Plasma forms the 55% and the formed elements form the 45%. And if we see about the plasma, it is a straw colored fluid, viscous fluid. It is slightly pale yellowish in color. This color is due to presence of a pigment called urobilinogen, and this pigment urobilinogen, it is yellowish in color and it is a breakdown product of hemoglobin, hence the plasma is seen as yellow colored. Talking about the composition of the plasma, we see that 90 to 92% is composed of water, and then major composition is by the proteins, 6 to 8% approximately. In these, maximum is by albumin, 4%, and then followed by immunoglobulins and fibrinogen. Albumin helps in maintaining osmotic balance, and in immunoglobulins, they help in the defense system, in the maintenance of our immune system, and fibrinogen, it helps in blood clotting or the blood coagulation with the with the help of the other clotting factors as well as the platelets. And besides these water and proteins, it also has other things such as electrolytes, sodium and potassium, calcium and magnesium, and all chloride and bicarbonate ions, and also has the the nutrients that are always in transit, such as the lipids and the amino acids, the fatty acids and the glycerol background products, and the glucose amino acids. And it also has the waste products such as the carbon dioxide and urea, and hormones, they also flow in them. So the plasma mainly composed of these things: water, proteins, electrolytes, metabolic nutrients, metabolic waste products, and hormones. Then talking about the formed elements, let's come to the form elements. What are they? They form the cellular part. In these there are three types. There are RBCs and WBCs and platelets. RBCs are also called erythrocytes. Why they are called red blood cells? They are red in color. Why? Because of the presence of hemoglobin pigment. Hemoglobin pigment is red in color, so they are seen as red. And they do not have any nucleus, and all the space is created to include all the hemoglobin pigments. And the other cells, WBC, it is mainly of two types. One is granulocyte, another is agranulocytes. What are agranulocytes? Means they do not have granules. When we stain them with hematoxylin and eosin stain, if they have granules, so they are called granulocytes. In granulocytes we see there are three types. One is eosinophil, red colored granules; basophils, they are blue colored granules; and neutrophils, they take up both color, the hematoxylin and the eosin, so they are called as neutrophils. In agranulocytes we have two structures. One is monocyte and lymphocytes. Here we have to see that the two structures, monocytes and neutrophils, they are phagocytic in nature, and they help in fighting with the bacteria and other foreign pathogen that they enter in our body. Monocytes, they transform into macrophages when they reach the tissues, and neutrophils, they also have phagocytic capacity. The movement of these blood cells out of the blood vessel, mainly out of the capillary, is called as diapedesis. Then lymphocytes, they are of mainly B cell and T cell. There are two types, and B cells, they mainly help in the transformation to the plasma and then release of the antibodies, and T cell, they maintain the T mediated immune system, that is to the T cells, so they are mainly cytotoxic in nature. So we have the maintenance of the immune system responsible for them, that is lymphocytes. So this is mainly about the white blood cells. Why they are white? Because they do not have any pigment in them, so they are called white. And then comes the third part, that is the platelets. Platelets, they are when they are in inactive form, they are plate shaped, as we can see over here. And when they are in active forms, such as they have to stop bleeding, then they develop tentacles over their surfaces, and then which help them in process of attachment and thus stopping the bleeding. So these are the skin structure. Talking about what are the counts, we just have to remember few things, like WBCs, they are least in number, 6 to 8,000 per millimeter cube. Then comes the platelet, which is around 1.5 to 3.5 lakh per millimeter cube. And then red blood cells, it is the maximum in number. It is approximately around 5 to 5.5 million cells per millimeter cube of the blood. Then comes the second part, that is the blood vessels. We have seen the blood part, and then come about the blood vessels. Blood vessels mainly it is of three types. One is artery, one vein, and capillary. Artery, it is thick walled and it has a smaller lumen, and vein, it has a larger lumen and thin layered. And capillary, it is very small in diameter and it has a very small lumen. It is just made up of a single endothelial cell. All these blood vessels have three linings. They have three, which first internal is called internal layer, and it's called theca interna, then theca media, and then theca externa is the outer media. So we have to remember these three linings that are present in these blood vessels. Artery, comes out from the aorta. It is branch of the aorta. Then the artery further forms arterioles. Then they further divide to form the capillary, and then the capillaries join to form venules. Then venules they form vein, and then they reach the vena cava, and then they reach back the heart. They form where they form a network of structures. So these are the tubes and tubules that we are talking in the introduction part. Then comes our major part, that is heart, which is the major pumping organ, the muscular chambered organ, which works as a motor, like we have seen in our household, how motor functions. When we build a motor inside the earth surface, then they help in pumping of the water to the first floor, second floor, and others. In this, similarly, the heart functions. It helps in pumping the blood throughout the body. So first, in heart, let us see about the anatomy, how the structure of the heart, where it is located. It is located in the central part of the thoracic cavity, that is called the mediastinum, slightly towards the left, and it is of size of the fist. If a fist is clenched, it is about approximately of that size, and it is slightly tilted towards the left side, in between the two lungs. Okay, this is about the location. Then comes the its wall, how it is made. So first, the covering of the heart is called as pericardium. It is of mainly three types. One is if you start from the innermost side, which covers the heart, it is tightly attached to the heart surface, that is called the visceral pericardium. It is made up of epithelial cell. Then comes the pericardial space, which is filled with the pericardial fluid. It helps in providing the buoyancy to the heart and helps from mechanical shocks. Then parietal pericardium, it is made up of epithelial cells. It is the third border. So in pericardium we have three things. One is visceral pericardium, pericardial space, and then the pericardium. So the visceral pericardium is also called as epicardium, and then we have the pericardial space with the pericardial fluid, and then the outermost part is the parietal pericardium. Then coming to the inner part of the heart, we see that it is mainly composed of muscles, that is called myocardium, and then the innermost part, it is made up of endocardium. It is made up of epithelial cells. This is made up of epithelial cells. So the innermost part is called the endocardium, the middle made up of the muscle, cardiac muscle, is called the myocardium, and then the outermost part is called the pericardium, in which we have three layers: epicardium, pericardial space, and the parietal pericardium. This we got with the structure. Then comes about the chamber. We have four chambers in the heart. Two left in the actually, if we are talking about the heart, we first must remember that this is the right side and this is the left side, as if we are observing a person and he is facing towards us. So that is the right side. This one is the right side, and that is the left side. So in the right side we have one atria, or plural atrium, singular atrium. Then we have one ventricle, and in the left side we have one atria and one ventricle. The right atria, it receives the oxygen poor blood, that is the deoxygenated blood. It receives the deoxygenated blood via the inferior vena cava and superior vena cava, and then the blood then flows into the right ventricle, and then the blood is then pushed to the outside to the lungs via the pulmonary artery. Okay, from there the blood gets oxygenated by the oxygen present in the lungs, and then the oxygenated blood then enters the pulmonary via the pulmonary veins. It enters the left atria, and then the blood, this oxygenated blood enters the ventricle, the left ventricle, and then the blood then flows into the aorta, and then it is distributed to the body, the upper body and the lower body, and then thus these aorta, branches of these aorta, they distribute blood to the cells of the body. All the cells of the blood receive oxygenated blood from them. Then these cells, they give the metabolic waste products and the carbon dioxide, and which are then given to the vessel, the vein, the venules, and then reach the heart through the vena cava from the inferior, and above from the superior vena cava. So we have to remember the blood flow. We have how the blood flows from the right atria to the right ventricle, then to the lungs, then receives oxygenated blood to the left atria, then to the left ventricle. In these structures, besides these, we talked about the flow, how blood flows. We also have valves. What is what are valves? Valves are the structures which are present in the heart, in between the chambers and the arteries and the veins, which helps in single flow, unidirectional flow of the blood. So we have 4 valves present in heart. For this one that are the highlighted. One is the first, we have to remember 2 atrioventricular valve. Atrioventricular valve means valve that is present between atria and ventricle. But on the right side it is called as the tricuspid valve, and the right side, how we can remember, mostly the right side we have strong right sided, we are right handed dominant. Then that has 3 cusp, tri, it is more, but left side has mitral valve, which is bicuspid. So we have to remember, I am writing here bicuspid. Bicuspid and mitral valve are present on the left side. It is present between the left atria and left ventricle. So we remember these 2 valves, tricuspid and mitral valve. Then comes the 2 other semilunar valve. They are semilunar, semicircular shape, hemicercle in shape, actually hemispherical in shape. Then they are called as pulmonary valve and aortic valve. Pulmonary valve is present in the pulmonary artery, and in the aortic valve is present in the aortic artery. How to remember the names of these things, artery or vein? We always have to remember that anything that flows away from the heart is always artery. Anything that flows away from the heart is called artery. A means away, and A means artery. So we have to remember anything that flows away. We do not have to remember about the oxygenated and deoxygenated, because we have 2 exceptions in this. We have to remember, generally artery, they carry the oxygenated blood, but we have 2 exceptions. One is in the pulmonary, the lung, pulmonary artery, they actually carry the deoxygenated blood, and pulmonary vein carry the oxygenated blood. And another example that generally we don't discuss is about the umbilical vein and umbilical artery. Here also umbilical vein carries the oxygenated and the nutrient rich blood to the fetus, and the umbilical artery carries the deoxygenated blood. So we have to remember anything that is carrying blood away from the heart is called as artery. Anything that is carrying blood towards the heart, receiving that is called vein. Okay. Then let's come to a few other points. Some thing that is mentioned also in the NCERT diagram, that is chordae tendineae and trabeculae carneae and papillary muscles. Trabeculae carneae, actually the heart is made up of mainly, we know that cardiac muscles, the myocardium we learned. They have some irregular muscle ridges which are called as trabeculae carneae. They have irregular ridges which are called as trabeculae carneae. They are the and something they are the long tall columnar cells, tall columnar structure which are present of the muscle structure, which are called as trabeculae carne. Some muscles, they will become finger like projections. They are called as papillary muscles, and they help in attachment of these of the valve with the help of chordae tendineae. What is chordae tendineae? Chordae tendineae is a fibrous structure, collagenous and made up of collagen and elastin. It is cord-like structure which helps in the attachment of these valve, atrioventricular valve, mainly the atrioventricular valve. It helps in attachment of the atrioventricular valve, so that the valve, they do not prolapse or they do not evert back during the by the pressure provided by the blood from the ventricles. So we have to remember these three topics, these three terms. One is the chordae tendineae, which are the cord-like structures that arises from the valve, and it is attached to the papillary muscles. Papillary muscles are finger-like projections, muscle structures that are present in the heart valve. Then we have trabeculae carne, they are irregular muscle ridges. So these three terms we have to remember. Okay, I hope you are understanding this topic. Then next comes about the circulation of blood, how blood flows. That is, we have double circulation of the blood. We know that the blood flows in the lungs also, we have discussed. So for oxygenation, that is called as the pulmonary circulation, and how when oxygenated, that is oxygen rich blood flows into the body, upper body and the lower body, which forms the systemic circulation. So we have two different circuit. One is pulmonary circuit, made for the making the deoxygenated blood oxygenated, and then transfer of this oxygenated blood to all the whole system is called systemic circulation. So two circulation, pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation. Hence it is called as double circulation, which is seen in humans. Then coming to the next topic, that is conduction system of heart. What is the conduction system of heart? Before starting, we have to remember that the heart, they have some special structure, special cells. They have special muscle cells which are specialized in the sense that they are auto excitable. They can get depolarized by themselves. They allow the entry of sodium ions, they get depolarized themselves, and then they can start an action potential, which then spreads to the heart. So these specialized nodal tissue, the muscular tissue, they are called as sinoatrial node. It is present on the, this one is the right side, so this is present on the upper right corner of the right atrium. This is called as sinoatrial node. And we have to remember, because this is the point from where the contraction of the heart starts. So we all know that the heart, we have cardiac muscles. They are cylindrical in shape, and they are branched. We know that, and they are uninucleate, and at the junction which they are present called intercalated disc, which have desmosomes and gap junctions, which allow easy transfer of the sodium ions. Hence they allow the easy transportation of the action potential, which spreads down from the SA node to the all heart. We will see how this conduction flows. First it starts from the SA node, then it reaches the AV node. Also we have to remember one thing, that SA node, because it starts the heartbeat, so it is also called a pacemaker. It maintains the pace of the heart, so it is also called the pacemaker. From here the heart, the signal, then it goes to the AV node, is atrioventricular node, which is present in the left corner, bottom corner, near the septum, near the atrioventricular septum. So it is called as AV node. From here it is also called as the pace setter, because this delays the signal by 0.1 second, so it is also called as pace setter. From here the signal then goes to bundle of His. This structure, this specialized muscular structure, this is called as bundle of His. We have to remember that the signal does not flow to the ventricles via this way, because we have in this septum called as atrioventricular septum. They have fibrous tissues and which are embedded deep into the heart, so they do not allow the transfer of action potential via the other ways. The action potential always travels from SA node to AV node, then to the bundle of His, then it divides into two branches, that is left bundle branch and right bundle branch, and then it further divides into very small structures called as Purkinje fibers, and then it distributes into the myocardium of the heart throughout the all ventricles, so which are called as Purkinje fibers. So we have to remember this conduction pathway. It may come in exam. How? The first, it starts from the SA node, which is called the pacemaker, then it reaches the AV node, which is called as pace setter. First is pacemaker, this is pace setter, and a bundle of His, then to the right and left bundle branches, then to the Purkinje fibers. We also have something called Batchman's bundle, which transmits the signal from SA node from the right atrium to the left atrium. Okay, so this is how action potential travels from in the heart. Next comes about the cardiac cycle. Cardiac cycle, it about the systole and diastole. What is systole and diastole? Any contraction of the heart, ventricle or auricle, it is called as systole. Any relaxation of these chambers, atria or ventricle, is called as diastole. So in this topic, we have to remember that it is a cycle, it repeats upon itself, so it is called as cardiac cycle. How it starts? For explanation, we have to first remember that it starts as a joint diastole. Joint diastole means both the atria and ventricle, they are in relaxed state. So how then the blood, it fills in the receives the blood, it received in the atria, it gets filled, and due to the weight of this filled blood, the atrioventricular valve, the tricuspid valve, it opens and the blood starts filling in the ventricle. This is called as passive filling, just due to the weight of the blood. And we also have to remember something, that some blood is always present in both each of the ventricles. The amount is 60 ml. 60 ml of blood is always present in the ventricle anytime. So in joint relaxed, first both were in relaxed state, and in this the ventricle is passively filling by the help of weight of the blood that is filled in the atria, and the atrioventricular valve opens and the blood, it gets filled. Then we have something called as atrial systole. There is contraction of the heart. Due to contraction of this heart, then the blood flows forcefully into the ventricles. The amount of blood that enters into the ventricle is faster than as compared to the previous filling, that is passive filling. So it is called as active ventricular filling. Thus the ventricle is filled. Then comes our next step, that is how the systole of the ventricles. The ventricles contract, then and the blood then flows outside towards their respective. That means in the right side, the ventricle will flow, the blood will flow into the lungs, and if you are talking about the left side, then the blood will flow towards the body. So when we have to remember that the amount of blood that is pushed out by the ventricle in each systole, ventricular systole, is called as the stroke volume. It is called as stroke volume, and the amount is equal to 70 milliliter. 70 milliliter is the stroke volume. That means the amount of blood pumped by each ventricle. Here the 60 ml blood is still left in the ventricle. It will always be present. So this is 70 ml is also called the stroke volume. We have to remember this, it comes in the exam. Then we have to remember one term also called as end systolic volume, and end systolic volume is the amount that is total, that the amount that was present in total in the blood, that was 60 ml plus 70 ml, 1 is equal to 130 ml. That is the end diastolic volume. At the end of diastole, how much blood was present in the heart, that is 70 ml plus 60 ml, 130 ml. Okay, so where we have reached? First we have one contraction from the atria, then blood has reached, then we have one contraction from the ventricle, blood flows out, and 60 ml of blood will always be present in the ventricles. We have to remember these. Then again the blood will get deoxygenated from the system and oxygenated in the lungs, and then again it will reach the atria, and then again this cycle will be repeated. So this complete one systole and one diastole of the ventricle and auricle is called as cardiac cycle. So we have to remember two important points in these, that one, that we have start with the joint diastole, both the ventricles and atria are in relaxed state, then this happens for 0.4 second, and then atrial systole which occurs 0.1 second, in which there is active filling of the blood. In joint diastole there was passive filling of the ventricle. In atrial systole there is active filling of the ventricle. Here we have to remember, when blood starts pushing towards the outside from the ventricle, then the atrioventricular valve gets closed to avoid the flow into the atrium. So this produces sound which is called as lub sound, and then this produces the first heart sound called the lub sound, and then it is followed by the ventricular systole, which occurs for 0.3 second. The heart contracts the ventricles contract for 0.3 second, and so the blood flows into the pulmonary artery and the aorta, and due to the decreased pressure in the ventricles, the blood flows back, tries to flow back into the ventricles. To stop this, prevent this flow, then suddenly the similar valves, they get closed, producing a second heart sound called as the dub sound. So the first heart sound is the lub and the second is the dub. In this way the heart sounds are produced if heard through a stethoscope: lub dub, dub dub, and lub dub. The difference between the first heart sound and second heart sound is 0.3 second, and the difference between the second heart sound and the first heart sound is 0.5 second. So we have to remember these two times. These timings may come. The difference between the second heart sound and the first will be 0.4 second plus 0.1 second, that is equal to 0.5 second. So this was about the cardiac cycle. So let us revise what we have learned today. Today we studied about the body fluids and the circulation, in which we studied that for the survival of every cell, some substances, nutrients and oxygen are required, and for metabolic products are produced, and for transportation of these substances blood is required. And two types of system, open and closed. Open, in which the blood cells are in direct contact with the body cells are in direct contact with the blood, and in closed circulatory system they always flow within the tubes and the tubules. Then we came to talk about the human circulatory system, in which the blood vessels and the heart. Blood composed of plasma and the formed elements, and formed elements had three parts: red blood cell, platelets, and white blood cells. Then we talked about the blood vessels, in which there is artery, vein, and capillary. Artery has broader walls, narrow lumen, and veins, they have narrow wall and larger lumen, and they have walls within them prevent the backflow of the deoxygenated blood, and connecting these are the capillaries. Artery break down into arterioles, and veins they collect together from the venules. So there is a interconnection between venules and arterioles is by the capillary, which is very small and very small lumen and only made up of single layer of endothelial cells. Then comes about we talked about the heart, in which we made up of 4 chambers. We talk about the body wall, and we have to remember the 4 important valves present and few important terms that are present in the ridges of the muscle layer in the myocardium, and papillary muscles which help in attachment of the valves with the help of chordae tendineae. We have two type of system, that is one is a systemic system and one is the pulmonary, which requires the lungs for oxygenation, and systemic the transportation of these oxygenated blood to the all parts of the body, upper body and the lower body. Then we talked about the conduction system, in which the SA node is a specialized muscle tissue which is autorhythmic and auto-excitable, and in where then the conduction flows from SA node to AV node, then to the bundle of his, and to the left and right bundle branches, and then further to the Purkinje fibers. So in this way the wave of contraction starts from SA node and reaches all the Purkinje fibers. And talked about the cardiac cycle. Here we have to remember the cardiac cycle is about 0.8 second, in which we have to start with the relaxation of both the atria and the ventricles. So there is a joint diastole for 0.5 second, then there is one arterial systole for 0.1 second. The blood then flows, artery contracts, and there is active filling of the blood, and in joint diastole there was passive filling. So the blood then, that is after the atrial systole, blood flows into the ventricles. Then at this time the ventricle starts contracting, and in this the blood starts flowing towards the atria, and then to stop this blood flow, AV valves that close, producing the first heart sound. Then the blood flows into the aorta and the pulmonary artery, and to prevent the backflow of this blood, similar valves get closed, producing the second heart sound called the dub sound. So we have one important point that we have to remember is regarding the cardiac output. One term, the cardiac output is nothing but how much blood that is ejected by each ventricle in 1 minute. So in total number of times SA node stimulates produces action potential is about 72 times, so the heart beats for about 72 times per minute, and the amount of blood that we know that was the stroke volume. That was the stroke volume, how much it was? 70 ml. 70 ml was the amount of total blood that was transported from each ventricle. From if you talk about one ventricle, one will go to the lungs, other will go to the body. So 70 ml we have to multiply. So in each stroke volume we have to multiply with the heartbeats. So in this way we can calculate about 5 liters of blood is ejected by the ventricles in 1 minute. So this is the cardiac output. So it is astonishing to see that this much amount of blood, 5 liters of blood flows every minute, it's transported by the heart, pumped by the heart. So I hope you understand this topic. So thank you so much.